So tell us a little bit about where they came from, how they end up in Waterford or whatever.
Sure, my mother is from Cork, farming family. My father is in Dublin, and they met when she moved to Dublin to work in the civil service, and they ended up together. And my father got moved to Mayo, Castlebar, Mayo. That's where I actually was born. And then after, just when I finished school, I ended up in Waterford because my father was transferred. He got a promotion and he worked here in the social welfare offices in Waterford. And we moved here. So I literally, when I moved in, I knew absolutely no one, not one single person in Waterford, except my mother and father. My two brothers had gone, they were in university and they'd moved out, and they were up in Dublin. So I was on my own. So what I got involved in, I got very involved in youth work. And I had in Dublin for 3 years, I had been involved with the Catholic Youth Council and in doing summer work for them in a youth centre. So I knew a little bit about it and I enjoyed it. So I got involved, and I got, first of all, I was living up in Lismore Heights with my parents. So I got involved in St. Paul's Youth Club, and got to know a few people then. And then that club, it sort of fell apart. So then I got involved in the Waterford Youth Council with the likes of Ciaran O'Neill and Father Paul Murphy and all those at the time. And I became the PRO. And I was very young now because I was literally only 18. And I got my first experience with doing something with the press at that time, because I was calling for a youth officer, which actually Joe Goff became the youth officer. And I was campaigning, that was the big campaign to have a youth officer. And we went down to, I remember, a local council meeting, and we had got tickets to get into the meeting. And I actually misunderstood what they had said at the meeting. And what they'd done in typical politicians' terms is they had kicked a touch on it. But I thought they had said no. So I went back to the youth office, which was over St. Francis Youth Club in Lady Lane, and wrote a real stiff letter to the papers. So the News and Star actually carried it on the front page the following week, saying that and the heading of it was Waterford didn't care about its youth. And then the RT contacted me, and they wanted to do an interview on the thing. I thought, wow, this is amazing. And funniest thing then was that around a year later, I was at the National Federation of Youth Clubs annual meeting up in Dublin, and the minister who was responsible for youth affairs at the time, I can't remember what it is. I remember Gareth Fitzgerald gave the talk on it at the thing, but the minister was responsible. He was introduced to me and he said, "Oh, you're the one causing all the trouble in Waterford." And I was so proud of that. And that was my first experience ever of getting involved in anything, but my only one politically, and just seeing what you could do, And we did get a youth officer. But the biggest thing of all about it was that it shaped my whole future in a way, because I got to know hundreds and hundreds of Waterford people. And like most people think that I was born here and I just know so many. And it was it was a great time. And this was the late 70s. And we had great fun, and I got to know some pile of people in the city because of that. And actually, the whole thing worked out then was that WLR were doing their pirate station at the time, and they very much wanted to get involved with young people and all that. So Des Whelan was looking to the youth office to get somebody who would do a programme once a week, a youth affairs sort of thing. So I was put forward to do the thing, and I did it. And I think it was with Clodagh Welsh at the time. And it ended up then that when I was there, that one day, I don't know why it was a thing, I was asked, would I be interested by Des to open up in the morning on the show to literally, you'd be talking about from 7:30 to 8:30. Now, at the time, I was working in Coopers and Librand, and I'd have to be in there at 9 o'clock. Anything. So I said, yeah, I'd love to, because they were open at 8:30, and so they wanted someone just a bit earlier. So it didn't matter that I wasn't any good or anything, but just put me on the air. And again, that at the time, all the young people used to listen at the time, because they weren't going to listen to RTE or anything. And what happened was that I was asked then by people, because I was doing it. Now, I loved it, and it was great fun. And I mean, I remember how young I was at the time. So we used to go up to crackers that Rick used to do up in the Ardree, and it would be over at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and then I'd have to go back. And I used to literally, especially when it was in Wellington Street, I used to sleep on the floor, and I used to have the operator to ring me at, because I was going on and I was doing, let's say, 7:30 to 8:30. So I'd have the operator on the phone to ring me at 7:25. I'd have the record set up, and my opening one was, "I'm the morning DJ." So she'd ring, or he would ring at 7:25. I wake up and get up and start doing the thing, and doing it for just an hour. And I did that for a couple of years, I think. But it was great fun. Now, I didn't have the voice for it. It wasn't any good, but it was a great experience. But what happened then is people used to ask me then, would I do discos? Would I do it for the party or whatever sort of thing? So I went and bought some disco equipment. And that's what started the whole thing, and got involved in entertainment in a very roundabout way. People assumed that because I was on WLR that I was a DJ. And I loved doing that. And how that developed more than anything else was that I very early on realised that DJing and for birthday parties or stuff like that, you were only going to get so much. That if you really wanted to get going and doing things, that the thing to do was to run the discos yourself. And the biggest thing is, this time was the time when Saturday Night Fever came out. I actually became a DJ exactly the same time as Saturday Night Fever came out. And it couldn't be better timing, because discos, at that time, before that, it was all the bands like Simon and everything like that. So I realised very early on that, actually a funny one was that when it was Star Discos, and I was doing it, we had Ray Halligan, Paul Power, we had Shamie Upton, and it was great fun. We used to do it between us, and we were in the tower one day, and I remember doing a disco, and we were doing, I think it was the No Name Club we were doing at the time on the Sunday. And you must remember, one of the biggest things at the time was all hotels used to do dinner dances on a Saturday night. There was no Saturday night that you'd be able to get, because there was always dinner dances on. But these were sort of coming to the end of their life, let's say, on having them all year round on occasions like that. But there was one in the tower we were doing the No Name Club on a Sunday night, which there were obviously no drink at, and it was for youngsters, and you played, and the guards were involved, and it was great to do it. It would be an early thing. But one day they had a cancellation for the following Saturday of a dinner dance. And they asked me, would I just do a disco? And they put on a couple of ads on the WLR on the thing, and it was jammers. And at that time, the big night for discos used to be Sunday, only because they couldn't get Saturdays. So Rick would do up the Ardrey on a Sunday night and be packed. But I realised that if I could get a Saturday night, so I was able then, when the Bridge Hotel opened, and I'd known Tom Tracy because I'd done a few things in the Showboat, and I used to support Simon and stuff like that. And when they was building the bridge, we used to do it on a Friday night. And of course, the chicken and chips that you had to do, that was the law. You couldn't get an extension. But even when they were in the middle of building the Bridge Hotel, doing it up all the time, they used to still do the discos upstairs on a Friday night, and in the middle of a building site. It was amazing those days. But when they opened the hotel, they had it all done and all that, I went down to talk to himself and Jim, and I persuaded them to give me a Saturday night down there, and we would do an thing, and we'd do it, rather than get paid a fee, I would do it for a percentage of the crowd. Now, we were only charging £2 in those days, right? And but it was such a success, like huge crowds. You wouldn't believe the crowds. And I got a great buzz out of that. I did that for a number of years. And I remember doing all the New Year's Eve, bringing in there, and it would be absolutely chock-a-block. And it was fantastic fun to do all that. It was a great time. But I sort of decided then that I'd like to have my own place. And what happened was that the Savoy in town had been run as a bingo hall and a gaming arcade, and there were a shop on each side of it. And it actually had closed down, and it was closed for around 6 months. And in the meantime, I had looked at I was interested in getting a place, and I had sort of looked at, maybe I'd try out in Tramore or something like that and do it for the summer. They had the Rex out in Tramore. And I found out that a Narrowbow owned it. And I went out to him, and he said, it was empty for all the time. He said, yeah, we look into that. But it became a bit of a controversial thing because the local residents didn't want it because it was the upper end of town and they just wanted it down in the prom or something like this. So he asked me to go to a meeting with the locals, which I did. And we got a lot of people expressing their annoyance at it and all that. So he said to me at the time, now again, you must remember I was very young, but he said to me, look, thanks for coming out and thanks for doing that, but I live here and I don't want to upset people, so I won't do it. So I said, grand, that was fine. I went on my own business. And then the Savoy, as I said, was closed for 6 months. And he owned that as well. And he was actually gone back to Bahrain, so he wasn't there. So I just rang up his assistant, Margaret in Tremor, who actually took a bit of shine to me. And she persuaded him. And he remembered me from the Rex to give me a go. Now, she told me subsequently, he said, within 6 months I'd be gone. That I was just too young and hadn't a clue sort of thing. And it was dear enough rent at the time to do it sort of thing. So I went into Savoy anyway, very naive, no money. I had literally 1 week's rent, that's all. And I got it a month beforehand. I went in and painted it all, literally day and night painting in there. And then I got the paint on credit. And then I had paid in the month's rent, the week's rent. And I was going for planning permission to turn it into a nightclub. So I went in, but I had to take it at the end of September. This was 1982 now, September 1982. So it was 30th of September, and I had to take it for that date. But we didn't have nightclub, we didn't have planning, we had nothing. And so I didn't know what to do. So Margaret in Tremont said to me, why don't you do bingo? Now, I'd never been at bingo in my life. I knew nothing about it at all. And she said there was a person there called Michael Barry, and who's since deceased. And why don't you talk to him? And he used to run. So I went down to him and he said, no, I have no interest whatsoever. And but eventually then he said, right, I'll go back and I'll just set you up and I'll call the first night. But that's all. And of course, Michael stayed. We were in the Savoy for 8 years and Michael was here in the Forum for a number of years. And so Michael showed me and taught me everything to do with bingo. And so I fell into bingo in a very roundabout way. And I've been doing it ever since. So this year, actually, I'll be 40 years doing bingo, which I never thought I'd be doing it at all. And it was very steady and it was good and it was ready-made for the place and all that. So I said, well, I don't need to do a nightclub, just do this. And then I fancied the idea because I've been DJing. I fancied getting into doing a bit of live music and all that. And Waterford was always been bypassed and all that. So I went up to Dublin and saw the main person who was involved in it at the time, so several, but the main one was Dennis Desmond in MCD. I met him in the SFX in Dublin. I remember on the stage they were talking to him and tried to persuade him. So I got him to agree to do a couple of things. He gave us Bad Manners, which was one of the first, they lived up to their reputation, their name. Big one he gave me was Phil Lynott. And I was absolutely, one of my earliest memories is, and that was, I think, just most probably a year before he died. And Phil Lynott walking into the office in the Savoy, and he seen the brochures he had. He walked in by himself, and I remember seeing a brochure of him doing a gig in Australia, an outdoor gig, and there must be 100,000 at it. It was so big, it was unbelievable. And stage a shot from the stage out. And thinking, what's he doing here now, you know? And I was a big fan of Thin Lizzy, and I thought it was fantastic to have him in. And we did others, and we did Dickie Rock, and we did all the Joe Dolan and all those sorts of things. And with yourself, one of the big ones was the Smiths, with your group at the time. Was it at Waterford Arts for All?
Music Moves.
Music Moves, I beg your pardon. Music Moves. And it was fantastic to get these things on. But the Savoy was sort of fairly run down. And it wasn't, it had been an old building. And like here, it had been built in the 30s. And it was a very solid building, but it needed a lot of work done to it. And the stage was quite small in it. So the Regal here in the Glen was the only other place that did bingo. And after just being in Savoy for a number of years, it was 1985, I went to the bank and I said to them, would they give me a loan if I went up to get the Regal? Because obviously to have the two places from a commercial point of view would be a great idea. And I only wanted the Regal really so that they wouldn't have the competition. in the bingo because it would make sense that if there was one bingo on rather than two bingos on, it would be a much better thing. So the bank at that stage, I mean, we were only just over nearly 3 years there. They said yes, surprisingly. And because they saw, look, he's still there, he's doing grants and all that. And so I went up. It was owned by the people who owned the Regina Amalgamated Entertainments, who they owned all the cinema thing, Ward Anderson. And I, again, very, very young, went up to their offices in Dublin in Abbey Street and just asked them would they sell it to me. And they said, yeah. And it was unbelievable. So got that at the time, and with the idea of not really particularly doing anything with it, but of just having it. And I really sort of saw my future in the Savoy and the thing. But the Savoy, the guy who owned it, the Arab, he wanted way too much money out. And the other thing happened is when we got the Regal, from the fire authorities, I got a notice within a couple of days of the deal being closed, telling me I couldn't use the balcony at all because it was a fire trap, and I had to do so much to it. It was unbelievable. So I said, right, if I do anything with that place, I'm going to have to do something big. So I said, right, I was advised, I was talking to Frank Fox, who was my engineer at the time, and he said, you've got to get an architect involved, and he recommended Paddy Nolan, and Paddy then got involved in the thing, and the project became something very special then. We could see that, oh look, if I do this, I can make something very special. And it was particularly, my aim at the time was to make it into a music venue that could hold more than 1,000 people, and that Waterford then would not be bypassed in all the tours that went by. And that it would be something, because the biggest one at the time was the Theatre Royal, which was 600 seats at the time. It's now around just under 500, I think. But so you couldn't justify an awful lot of tours unless you had a 1,000-seater. And Galway were getting them, Cork was getting them, and even Limerick. But Waterford was being bypassed. So over a period of 5 years, from 1985 to 1990, put a lot of money and a lot of effort into making up the Forum, and finally opened it in 1990 with the idea that it would be a music venue. And most important thing in any business is to have bread and butter stuff. And bingo has been the bread and butter for me from all my business career. And it's been very good to me. And it's ironic that it's the thing I'm ending up just doing. And I never intended sort of to do bingo. It was more to do the entertainment thing. But bingo has been the bread and butter for me, and has been absolutely fantastic. And it's just amazing the way things work out. But in 1990, we opened up, and the day in the Forum and left the Savoy. I was renting the Savoy, but owned the Forum. But when it opened up, we changed it. We did a competition. It had been the Regal to get a name, and picked the Forum on it. And then when we opened it up, the day after we opened it up, Waterford Crystal went on a 14-week strike. So it wasn't a good omen, because Waterford was going through a very bad time at the time. It was also Italia 90, first time Ireland ever got in a World Cup. And there was World Cup fever. And so that wasn't good for getting crowds either. And the last thing, it was the hottest summer that I could remember in years. So we had opened up, and actually it was the 1st of April this place opened up. And it was, so it was a very tough summer. And but we got through it. With the first person to play here was appropriately Val Doonigan, and he officially opened the place. Thankfully, this was done in July. We officially opened it, and the week before the Christmas strike ended, and things started to look up then, which it looked very bleak, I can tell you, at the time. And but it opened up anyway, and what we did then is we've over the years basically changed the Forum into different things that has kept it going. We've moved at the time. Like, the biggest thing for us is always to keep adapting as things change. But the idea of doing it with, it was actually 1,200 seats we had at the time, and it was all seated. And it was fantastic for the likes that we had. The biggest act we most probably had here was Johnny Cash, and Chris Christopherson played on the one night, and they played 2 gigs, an early one and a late one. And it was unbelievable. And to think I met him, and to think that, I mean, he came out, and the charisma, I'll never forget to this day. He walked out on the stage and he just said, "Hi, my name's Johnny Cash." And the atmosphere. And I'd have to say, Ollie, that the biggest thing in my career of this business is magic moments when no matter what, I wouldn't really be into country music, and there'd be a lot of DJs who played over the years, and I wouldn't be into their sort of stuff, let's say. But if they get a crowd going, you can't. What's hard to put it? It's a feeling. It's like the hair standing at the back of your neck, and it's fantastic. And that's the thing I've enjoyed most, and it's a very valuable thing. It's a great thing to have. But when we opened up, we had Billy Connolly here. We had him twice. We had the Cars here. We had Sister. We've had some really good nights. But we were very limited because of it being all seated to doing these gigs that were most probably going to be the equivalent of, if you put them all together, of somewhere between 10 and 20 a year. And Waterford just wasn't big enough to justify more than that, the variety. But we did everything from ballet to opera to anything. We had the Chippendales, we had strippers, we had everything you could think of. And we went on, and in the 90s, and things, as you know, like in the early 90s, things were dreadful in Ireland. Huge emigration, very tough economically time. But by the end of the 90s, it's amazing how things had changed. And we were starting to get immigration instead of immigration. And things had changed so much that I was able to go to the bank and say to them about buying the pub that was next door, and which was the Glen Tavern at the time, or not the Glen Tavern, Prendeville's at the time, beg your pardon, and they got the money for that, absolutely no problem, because banks were starting to give out money at that time. So suddenly, and by the way, one of the biggest things we had done in the 90s is we had got a theatre licence. So Dublin and Cork, there had been theatre licences there, and one place in Limerick had got it. And we were the next one in the country. And it took a while to get it, but we got it. But that changed everything as well, because it meant then suddenly we could do things. So we wanted to do like Midnight at Olympia. And I remember we did the very first one we did. And this was in 93. Was Niamh Kavanagh opened it on the first night. She had just won the Eurovision that year. And Aslan had reformed. And they came, Crazy World had just come out. And they played the second night. And again, another magic moment was with them, in that we literally had the bar, which is beside us here, open up and built at that time. And after their gig, everyone was gone, and Ken Crangle and myself were the only ones from the Forum here. And I remember sitting down on the floor. We had no stools or anything at the time, and they were all there, and they had to sing song. And they were singing Christy Moore songs and making up their own words. And it was just some unbelievable moments. It's just another one of those moments that was incredible. But we found with the 1,200 seats, it was just too much. And bingo was on and kept going, and people were sitting in the seats playing their books. And so we'd try and avoid, so weekends, we were, let's say Friday and Saturday nights, we would try and do live gigs, and then we would have the bingo. But 1,200 seats was too big. So I got the idea then that if we could separate the place, and we got the license at the pub next door, so we had the license. So if we could put a laundry license, let's say, on the place as well as the theatre license, which we had now, we were able to do that. Then what we could do is we could separate upstairs and downstairs. So we took away the void in front of the balcony, and we separated. We moved actually for 6 months down to the Metropole, which was closed, and we held bingo. So in all the years, in 40 years, bar a snowstorm or bar Christmas Day or thing, we've been continuously, it has not been on, and coronavirus is the big one that closed it down. Bar that bingo has been continuously on all the time. And even then, when coronavirus, we did home bingo instead. So it's been a constant on the thing. But getting back to here, dividing it in 2000, we divided we got the pub in 1998, and in 2000 we divided the place into upstairs and downstairs. So the idea is downstairs then became more like a hotel ballroom. You could do loads of different. We did weddings in there. There were no seats in there at all. We kept 300 seats up in the balcony part that had been in the balcony, and we put a huge stage. And we were able to do, because it was the big stage at that point, and we were able to do, remember, what was the one, the Spree did, Dermot Quinn, he had one for a children's one that was on the head, and it was Red Kettle, I beg your pardon, it wasn't Spree, it was Red Kettle, and Red Kettle did that, and we had some great nights with Red Kettle here, because they did plays, and they did, and the Theatre Royal actually was closed for renovations during that time, so we were doing it all here. And we did an awful lot of shows like that. And then what we were able to do is we were able to do late night clubs. So this was the beginning of that for us, really. And we had started off doing it when we got our licence first in 93. And we were the very first in Waterford to copy an idea in Dublin where it was free in, but you would have 70s and 80s music at the time. We called it Deja Vu. And that was, and we went on late, and we became known as the 4 a.m. And it was a fantastic. It was free, but the drink would be maybe 50 cent dearer or 50p dearer or whatever. And that went on for a number of years, and then Downtown started doing that. So we then started doing an indie club and doing DJs and stuff like that, and that was very successful because obviously the more commercial end of nightclubs and all that was downtown. So we had things like Shakedown and Sean and Luke were doing, and then we eventually did our own one called Traffic, and these went on for years, and like each of those were on 5-6 years each. And we had the loveliest crowd, I have to say, in all the years here. The crowd that came to Traffic were absolutely fabulous in that we so rarely had any bother with them. And it was an eclectic group of people. You could dress as you want, and got to know and all the artsy people and everything. It was really great. And one of my prouder things I'm after doing here too is that we started Jerry Forrestal. Flytrap was the first gay club in Waterford. And we did that. And that was kind of risky from our end to do it. In that, obviously, he was looking for a place and get that, which is hard to believe now. But to do it then, sort of thing, the big danger was if you did it, you could get stigmatised that you were actually just a place for gay people and other people couldn't be seen at it, you know. It was long before it became cool. And so we did that long before anyone else. And it was the first outlet for anyone in Waterford to go to a gay club was here. And so we did that. So we did a huge variety. One of the funniest things is downstairs, I remember one night we literally had strippers on one night, and the next night we had mass celebrated downstairs. So we've had absolutely everything, boxing matches, wrestling, we did the Euros in here, showed them all. We've done so a pile of different things, from the highbrow to lowbrow and everything in between. And it's been a blast. We then moved after we had this in 2000, around 2006 then, we realised, like doing the concerts earlier, that just the demand wasn't there to have this place with 300 seats. It might be used for a week or two at a time, and then you might have it used then for another month or 2 months or thing. It just didn't make sense. So what we did is we said, right, at that time we had opened a off license, which was the next door off license, and it was very successful. And we had done that instead of the pub, because the pubs were they were going through a tough time, pubs, and they were it was hard to keep a pub going. So the off license was very successful. And we said to ourselves then, if we made that into a venue that would do bingo, and it could still do our clubs and all that. And downstairs, if we made it into a restaurant. So in 2006, we started our work and all that. And we opened it in as I said, the off license was very successful, but the restaurant, we opened it in December 2007, and put a lot of money into it, and got it going. And I found it very hard when we opened the first time. We had too many people and made all the mistakes you make and that sort of thing. But by the following January, February, I think we were getting there. The numbers were just getting right, and everything was looking good. And March 2008, it was like someone flicked a switch, in that the recession hit, the financial crisis hit then, and the crash, and people stopped going out. And it just went dead on the time. But we had at that stage the restaurant downstairs. we closed it. And we had upstairs then was where we were doing all the clubs, and bingo was the constant in this. But then around 2 years later, the same thing started happening in the clubs. So instead of people paying to get in, all the clubs were letting people in free. The drink, people were starting to doing it for cheap drink and stuff like that. It just didn't become worthwhile. So we had to make a decision what to do at that stage. And again, we had to reinvent ourselves. And also, we were very conscious that in all the years we had done bingo, that all the other bigger bingo halls, which we were sort of getting involved with as an association, they all had sit down, which is behind me here, all these seats, and they had electronic bingo and all that, and we didn't. So it was time then to either take bingo seriously for the first time, and not to take it serious, but to make it exclusively bingo, let's say, so that you would have a proper bingo hall and that you couldn't be all things to all people. And the decision became very easy because with the clubs down, they were a regular thing, and we were still doing the acts. So we had the likes of Christy Moore, who I built up quite a good relationship with. I'd say more than anyone else I've dealt with. I built it up with him, and so he did our last night here in live music in 2014. And we then, within a few weeks, I think we did it in something like 6-7 weeks, we converted up here. We put in false ceiling and the whole place, and we painted all. It used to be a big black box, so we made it brighter colours. We deliberately went for yellow just to make sure that it was the opposite to what the dark was. Put in all the lights, and we had got all these seats and came from the UK, and we put it all in, and then we moved bingo up here, and we've been doing bingo up here ever since. And it's delighted with it. We let out the downstairs. Then we decided that the restaurant and the off license, that the expertise to run those were better for people who knew and exclusively ran them. So we let them out now. We have the studios here are let out as well to the Waterford Film Centre, and we let out offices. Waterford Walls are in our offices. So now we've changed again. So what we do is we let out half the place. We just run bingo. My life is so much easier now, but I still treasure every moment of both the clubs. The last one I'd like to mention is Spree have been very special to us over the years. Spree ran their festival club here every year. And other than Christmas, that was our busiest time of the year, the first weekend in August. And also we used to bring in New Year's Eve here with Spree all the time. And we've had some very, very good memories and very happy times with Spree. And I think they are an amazing organisation, and I have great respect for them, with TV and Miriam and all those involved. They have been very good to us here, and I wanted to acknowledge that.
You're also involved in other initiatives in Waterford for music. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about them?
The other one was we decided Mick O'Keefe was working here in the Forum for the last number of years before we finished our doing live music, and we had this idea that why again are all festivals taking place in other places in Galway or Cork or Limerick, but not Waterford. So came up with this idea, Day Tripper, with the idea of putting something on, and the only reason we were doing it is literally for Waterford. We didn't do it. It wasn't a money-making venture. It wasn't an ego thing or anything. It was purely just something that we thought we'd have the skills between us to do it. So there was 4 of us involved in it. Mick O'Keefe, who would have the expertise in booking all the acts and doing the publicity for getting them. Clem Jacob, who for all the logistics on the site and the fencing and the toilets and all that sort of thing. With Paul Jackman, who would do the bar down there. And myself, my main role was to liaise with the officials, the council and all that. We went down to see the council, and Michael Welch was absolutely so much in support of this that he made it happen. Without him, it couldn't have happened. And his team down there, and Finn and all the guys, they backed it fully from the beginning and gave it great support. And we ran it. And I have to be honest with you in that it's very tough to do something like that in Waterford, because we ran it for 7 years. from 2013 to 2019 inclusive, with huge acts. And it was tough to get the numbers that we know would have been got if we had even run it just up the road, if we hadn't run it in Waterford. I mean, it's if you take our last one, for instance, you had Gavin James, you had Madness, and you had the RTE Orchestra with Jenny Green on the thing. And each one of those should have absolutely packed it. It's a huge risk because you're risking a six-figure sum like to run the thing, and we ended up actually not making any money at all out of the gigs. The first year we ran, there was a huge loss, a big serious loss. We had one really good year, which got us out of trouble, which is the one that the Clean Bandits were huge at the time, and they had their number one hit just at the right time when we had them, and they were absolutely chock-a-block. But we had great, with Paul Heaton, Jackie Abbott there, the Beautiful South. The Beautiful South played in the Forum as well, by the way, so the idea was to bring our skills together that very few other people could actually do, let's say, in that we had the set of skills. And I thought we were good at doing it, but the risk, we were very lucky that we stopped in 2019, because if we had done our lineup for 2020, obviously we would have been closed due to COVID, and we would have paid deposits, and we wouldn't get our money back, and we would have been in serious trouble because we would have spent our money on our publicity and everything. So we were very lucky, but it's you'd want to be a bit of a mad person to actually run gigs like that big, and we did it. We think it was good for Waterford to have done it, and especially to have done 7 in a row on the thing. We what you call it. I don't know if we do it again. I think it's very, very risky. It's very.
And just to finish off, just about the cultural quarter and this end of town, we say this was the entertainment end of town. We say we take the Bridge Hotel, the Metropole you mentioned, the Roxy,
yes,
the Forum, all of the entertainment places were down in this end of town, and now there isn't much down this end of town as regards live music or venues or that. I mean, do you think it's just like a cycle of things that happen, or how?
Things change all the time, and I do think that you must remember that why it happened really was that in the centre of town before, it would have been looked at as a place for the bars, but not for the nightclubs. Were a thing that were sort of auxiliary. They were things that were put in hotels, and the hotels would have dinner dances and weddings and stuff, and they would have done. There weren't any nightclubs as such, let's say. But when they developed, they became, and like everything else, it always moves to a particular place, and it happened like in Temple Bar in Dublin or anything like that. If you put a group together, it often works better. But I think the Culture Quarter is a great idea for Waterford, and I think they could leave. Nightclubs are struggling, and I think it has to be a lot more than that. And I believe the Culture Quarter here will be. I think it's a very good thing to have, but I think it has to be eclectic. It has to be fairly mixed, and all different levels of it, all right? And I think the biggest thing is not to get snobbish about it, that it doesn't just be like having art galleries and things like that. I love the fact of closing the street in O'Connell Street and having live gigs there, and having the bit of food out there and all that. And I think that is the way forward. I think to have a right mixture of stuff going on, and I think that the vision for it is something like that, and I hope it does happen. I think it'd be great for Waterford, and I'm very, very pro Waterford, and I'm really proud to be here and proud that we've done, and I think that we've contributed to it. I think our building here in the Forum has, if that wasn't here, the Glen would be a pretty sad place. And I think that I think that anyone that does something that stands out. I'm sorry to see the parlour rooms closed. I think that added to Waterford. I think things like that are very good. I love seeing the way Waterford is with the food places that are all coming on now, and you have the likes of Everett's and Momo's, and you have the likes of the Italian place down in George's Court and the Italian bakery at Seagull and all that. I think that's a great thing. I think the Greenway is a great thing. I think it's fabulous. And hopefully commercially things will happen with the North Quays and all that. And I think that going with all that, the Cultural Quarter fits in very nicely. And I think leave the students and all that, if they want to stay in a particular area in town, leave that be the nightclub quarter. But I think the Culture Quarter should be a lot broader thing, and I think it is good. And my hope is that it will spread from O'Connell Street, that it'll spread up to the Glen and Ballybricken, and I would hope that would develop. I think the Ballybricken and the Glen have been very neglected, and I do understand that the council can only do so much and they need to do one bit at a time or a couple of things together, and it needs to grow from there. But Waterford's a great city. We've some natural assets here, and it's a place that I think is getting there, but still has a long way to go.
Thanks very much.
That's all.